Our next speaker is Hien Nguyen, but we just call her Hien. She's a German-based futurist, philanthropist, and social impact entrepreneur who's best known as a ninja for her energetic drive and passion for space, longevity, exponential technologies, and innovation. She's the founder, executive director at Space Connects, with a mission to connect, collaborate, and catalyze ideas, actions, people, and projects that lead to the opening of the space frontier. They envision a future in which humanity is expanded into the solar system, contributing products and services that will foster a better life for all humankind. And since 2009, she's been the CEO and founder of High Performance, where she works as a functional medicine practitioner and high performance coach.
Thanks for the introduction, Rand. What the space tech analytics team is doing here is very important and valuable. I agree with Dr. Jennifer. The reports are amazing. My presentation would be a small contribution. It's very helpful actually to these reports are almost like swipe files into the complex space and longevity industry. So I see this as a deep privilege, and I'm looking forward to share space with such an esteemed lineup of speakers, colleagues, friends, and I see also a wide global audience with a huge interest in staying healthy in space. So it's really getting real. So my name is Hien Nguyen, as Rand already introduced me. I'm a physiotherapist by education turned philanthropist, and the founder of High Performance Center. It's a practice where we do high performance coaching, physical therapy, functional nutritional coaching, naturopathy, and so forth. For fun, I'm an athlete also with and just recently actually sold my business in 2019. I must have future forecast the disruption. In 2019, yeah, before the disruption happened, I sold my business and I signed up for the International Space University and became an SSP alumni, and was elected as a UN Space for Women Network mentor in 2020. And now we are in the second year of the mentorship program, where we inspire women and girls for STEM and space education. So I would like to start the presentation, of course, with our latest inspiration for crew mission, which included Isaac Mann, St. Jude physician's assistant Haley, who lost her leg due to cancer and is the first astronaut with a prothesis in space right now, and data engineer Chris Sembrowski, and geoscientist, space artist, entrepreneur, and dear friend, Dr. Hien Proctor. They performed a number of experiments in orbit around Earth. With a team from SpaceX, Trish, I don't know if you hear Dr. Dorit, Baylor and Cornell collected environmental and biomedical data, as well as biological samples, like blood from the crew, just actually is EGC activity, movement, sleep, heart rate, rhythm, blood oxygen levels, as well as the light and sound levels with the crew tracking behavioral and cognitive performance. They use really simple apps called Cognition, organ system using AI, intelligent powered ultrasound device designed for use by non-experts to assess the crew's balance, perception before and after the flight. So it's very interesting to see that they're actually using simple innovations that was developed on Earth as opposed to opposite around. So SpaceX is also working with the researchers at Weill Cornell Medicine to study the genome, microbiomes, and telomeres. Similar to the NASA twin study, they will be working to replicate many of the same protocols and experiments that were innovated for that study on the famous NASA twin study. I think they cryonically freeze these data for further analysis. So in today's talk, I will not deal with based on my background, I will deal with physiological, space physiology and aging. I will not mention cardiovascular physiology or pulmonary physiology. I think that's the most studied systems in space, but with respect to aging and possible benefits for the elderly or disabled on Earth. So the physiological challenges on the human body, of course, with the transition between different gravity field is complex and affects a person's spatial orientation, head, eye, hand coordination, balance, locomotion, and increased risk of experiencing motion sickness as described in this figure. So as we transit to Mars, would decrease the duration of physiological changes due to reduced gravity. If this transit were possible at 1g acceleration, then we assume the negative effects of microgravity would be avoided. So, so astronauts coming back from long-term missions, they present similar, similar issues like in the elderly. Immune system, impaired immune system, the defects were identified in response to real and simulated microgravity, increased virulence, antibiotic resistance, enhanced susceptibility to infections during space missions. We see this actually in elderly, even as we sit here, you and me, we have, in my daily practice, the big issues really are micronutrient deficiencies. And as we venture out into space, the harsh environment is even more deficient. Like we see this every day. You mean we're deficient in magnesium, a well-known micronutrient due to soil depletion, magnesium and zinc, which is important for all enzyme activities. Muscle tendon unit and exercise as countermeasures. Sarcopenia is a typical aging-like effect of microgravity on muscle tendon unit structure and function that is still awaiting effective physical, nutritional, and pharmacological countermeasure. So this could also be benefit on Earth for the rehabilitation of injured elderly people. So we practice actually fall training every day with elderly people. So since the early space flight era, the research in the field has been extensive. Here we use also branched chain amino acids to maintain lean mass. So that has been also been effective in space. So insulin resistance and endocrine changes, also well known in the elderly and in the space environment. Insulin sensitivity changes that typically accompany aging on Earth and that gradually will progress to diabetes. They have been repeatedly reported in these space flights. But as we know, diabetes 2 is the hormone that we can 100% control through intelligent dieting. So the space osteoporosis is well known, characterized by lower bone formation rate and enhanced bone resorption. So supplementation of D3 and K2 supplementation and anti-resorptive drug administration is useful. And then again, in the elderly, a normal thing, anyone living north of the equator now, entering fall here and winter, we're all vitamin D deficient. And I don't know, must ask Dr. Shauna how fast they drop the D levels in space. Another issue is melatonin and sleep. Unrelated functions, decrease in nighttime melatonin secretion is observed during aging. So trouble falling asleep and of course staying asleep when your head is constantly moving, waking up with low energy, sleep disturbances, nighttime and daytime and sleep are disrupted in space flight, noise, exposure to office-like dim light, which disrupts melatonin production. We use the Oura Ring. I think it's a startup invented 2 or 3 years ago, or you can use your Apple Watch. I prefer the Oura Ring. It's the and I'm not sure if the Inspiration 4 crew has used that to measure their REM, the quality of their sleep. The next is the CNS changes, the central nervous system changes, and behavior may be impaired in weightlessness due to the changes in cerebrovascular circulation, increased blood pressure caused by the redistribution of body fluid, the narrowing of the central sulcus, upward shift of the brain. This may be relevant to vestibular patients and elderly people with multisensory deficit syndromes or merely inactive individuals. Postural stability is yet another aspect of central nervous system's performance. That is affected by spaceflight as well as aging. Postural control system is tied together by links between vestibular, visual, and sensory information. Another aging issue is optic nerve edema due to changes, as mentioned, in the central nervous system, linked to changes occurring in the ZNS, a threatening and still poorly managed side effect of long duration space flight. The optic nerve head, edema causing reduced visual acuity, eye defects, such as here in this picture, eye defects, refractive error, and dysedema, choroidal, I can't even pronounce it, fold, spaceflight association, neuroocular syndrome, pressure accompanying the cephalad fluid shift, blood-brain barrier breakdown. So imaging technique is now expected to allow the assessment of longitudinal changes in the development and testing of countermeasures in astronauts, as well as potentially in patients suffering from dysedema on Earth. So the next challenge is vestibular defects and motion sickness, well known, another typical problem by astronauts as well as the elderly, especially at the beginning of their space flight. Motion sickness, allocating less attention to the central field during visual motion simulation has been recently found to be associated with more stable action and higher resistance to motion sickness. So virtual reality application designers may use this finding to strengthen and stabilize action while reducing the risk of visually induced motion sickness. Space anemia in space is also typical of aging, like consequence of microgravity, requiring greater understanding not only for the sake of astronauts, but also to improve the quality of millions of elderly on Earth. Pharmacokinetics and dynamics, the monitoring of physiological changes. Aging often alters pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of life-saving drugs. Similar microgravity induces many physiological adaptations, and therefore pharmacology in space is work in progress because it requires continuous monitoring of the physiological changes and pharmacological behavior with each mission duration. So numerous factors unrelated to microgravity may affect drug effects and interfere with normal physiology, such as abnormal radiation or CO2 levels, spacecraft light intensity below the threshold for maintaining metabolic biological rhythms, circadian rhythm issues, activities such as AVRs, daily exercise, workload, eating, social interaction, participation of astronaut as test subject in flight experiments of drug administered as preventative or counter measures. So nasal route drug administration for local and systemic delivery of many drugs is an attractive strategy for clinicians, as the nasal cavity is highly vascularized and provides a large surface area for drug absorption. So such finding might be great interest in space pharmacology, where enhanced nasal drug delivery in microgravity may be desired. So synthetic tissues, artificial organs, both drug research and surgery nowadays largely rely on synthetic tissues. As more and more organs fail as we age increases and transplantation suffer from shortage of donors all over the world, while bioethics ask more and more for cruelty-free drug research. That's why for the last 10 years, artificial organs have become the object of extensive research, which seems to pave the way to productive large-scale solutions. One company, such as United Therapeutics Corporation, I believe it's a biotechnology company, which long-term mission is to provide unlimited supply for transplantable organs. Another company, one of my mentors, Peter Diamandis, is investing or co-founding with is Cellularity. There's a new startup. They have recently raised 250 million on a mission to stop aging. This company is working on finding a remedy to many of the world's illnesses, and within an unlikely source, they store human placenta. They claim to extract stem cells from those placentas, will be able to fight disease as well as slow down the aging process. How this will benefit us in space, let's see. His vision is to augment immunity and augment longevity. The last challenge is EVA, extra vehicular activity and decompression sickness risk, were thought to affect only the young, but more and more middle-aged people progressively becoming old and decide to spend their money in different way than before to test their performance limits and feel younger than they are by getting involved in like underwater or mountain activities. This seems different from what happens in flight. Space can be viewed as a suitable yet involuntary test bed for possible life-threatening events faced by elderly people on Earth. Before the very first EVA was carried out, NASA realized that that decompressed sickness risk due to variable degrees of venous and arterial nitrogen embolism, either limited to tendons causing bends or generalized lung and brain lesions, was a risk that had to be mitigated. So the NASA spacesuit, referred to as extravehicular mobility unit, has a certain pressure. I don't know how much about the vacuum of space. So increasing the spacesuit pressure and or reducing cabin pressure are two ways to decrease the pressure gradient between environment to help minimize risk of DCS, as complete elimination of DCS is practically impossible. So in conclusion, participants looking for a systemically organized, exhaustive report of space physiology and longevity in space may be disappointed. Such review has been published by Space Tech Analytics, not in 20 minutes by myself. However, due to exponential growth of technologies and development of science, such reviews run risk of soon being outdated. As stated in my introduction, my intention was to offer you an update of new findings as advanced research become available. And I hope we can cross to talk between space, Earth, and aging physiology continues to enrich scientific and social relevance. I hope I have provided the curious with a source of inspiration and creative ideas. I will leave you with a quote. Longevity. I don't know how to close this window, I can't read it. Longevity is the most complex, important, and impactful field and the biggest business opportunity of this century. The problem is that there is so much information about longevity that even beginning a quest for answers can be overwhelming. This is an excerpt, an intro from the recent book written by Dimitri Kamenetsky and Margareta Colangelo, Longevity Industry 1.0. So if you would like to have an overview of this complex industry, I highly recommend you to read this book and anything Space Tech Analytics is sharing. So thank you for your intentions. This is how you can contact me for any further questions. Thanks again.
Yeah, it's fits very well with the theme, and certainly with what Deep Knowledge Ventures is interested in, because of they started out in longevity, and I'm sure Dimitri appreciates the plug for his book.